אפשר כבר לדבר גם על הבגינים. יש לי כאן את כל החומרים כאן עליי.
Good evening, everyone. Good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. Thank you for joining us for what I think is going to be a really fascinating event. My name's Paul Gross. I'm a senior fellow here at the Menachem Begin Heritage Center in Jerusalem. And I know on this call, on this Zoom meeting, are a number of people who have attended some of our other Zoom events, and also some people that are new to this format and new to us. So I welcome all of you. I'll just explain briefly about how it's going to work, and then I'll introduce our speakers. We're going to hear from our two speakers, our principal speaker being Gil Samsonov, being interviewed by Shmuel Rosner. And after that, we're going to take questions from you. You can write those questions into the chat box at the bottom of the screen, and they will be read out for our speakers to answer. Okay, without further ado, I shall introduce our speakers. So we're very privileged and honored to have with us Gil Samsonov, the author of well, it's a new book in English, I believe. I think it's been out in Hebrew for a while, but new in English. I have it here, copy in here. In English, it's Netanyahu and Likud's leaders, the Israeli princes. I think in Hebrew it was just the Likud Princes, Nasichim, the princes. Gil Samsonov is a managing partner in one of the top advertising firms in Israel. He graduated from Tel Aviv University and has a PhD from King's College, London, fine city. Samsonov has led numerous national and local election and general campaigns in Israel. He's a senior political and marketing commentator on Israeli television, radio, and print. And his new book that we're going to hear about is available on Amazon, so you can find it there. And we're very happy to have with us interviewing him Shmuel Rosner, a fellow at the Jewish People Policy Institute and the non-fiction editor for Israel's largest publishing house, Kinez Mora Bitanvir. He's senior political editor for the Jewish Journal, a contributing opinion editor for the New York Times, and he's also the co-author of Israeli Judaism, Portrait of a Cultural Revolution, which you can see in his background as well, which is a great book, which he actually was here at the Begin Center talking about last year. And he also has a podcast in English called Rosner's Domain that I heartily recommend. So without further ado, I'm going to mute myself and hand you over to Shmuel Rosner and Gil Samsonov.
Hello and thank you. It's a great privilege to be here again at the Begin Center. When I was speaking about my book about a year ago, I was hosted at the center itself. I was there in both mind and body. This time we have to do it digitally, but I'm sure the conversation will be no less interesting because of the format. Let me say something about the princes, Hanesichim, and about the book. And it'll be a short statement. You cannot understand Israel of the last 40 years if you don't understand the Likud party, the ruling party for most of this era. You cannot understand the Likud party if you don't understand the princes and princesses. And you cannot understand the princes if you don't read Gil's book. So this is basically, that's why you have to read Gil Samsonov's book, because that's the key to understanding Israeli politics these days. Everything begins and maybe ends with the princes and the princesses on which the book is talking. So, hello, Gil. This is not our first conversation on the princes. I was involved in publishing the book in Hebrew, and we did an interview in English as well about the book. But I'll start with the question that we always must start with. And it is, what are the princes? Who are the princes, and why do you call them that?
It's first of all, it's my honor to be here and to speak with you and with all of you. The name is misleading. because princes, nesichim, it looks like the sons and the daughters of kings in English. In Hebrew, in the last 30 years, it's more and more this term belongs to those princes, those members of Knesset, the ministers, the president, prime minister, who are not princes, daughters of the freedom fighters of the Etzel and Lehi in the beginning, before the country was established, the underground, and they came to help their parents who were neglected and were in the corner of the Israeli society. Think about it, that the underground fighting for the freedom of Israel, achieving the freedom of Israel, and after it, Ben-Gurion, Mapai, and the Socialist Party, the Avodah, Labor, whatever the names, they changed the names, they pushed them aside and had brand them as fascists, as dangerous people, and they were not in power. In all the other countries, the underground took over, and they were the leaders of the country. And then, in this case, they were, even starved. They couldn't get a job. And then what happened is that the young sons and daughters came to help the parents. They came to help Begin and Shamir and Livni, others. And during this process, they came, הם באו לבקש לעזור וקיבלו מלוכה.
Yeah, they were looking for donkeys and found royalty. So what you're saying basically is that unlike the term princes that usually refers to the second generation royalty, these people were the offspring of the opposite of royalty. These were people cast aside by the ruling regime of the Labor Party. They were ostracized. They were marginalized in many ways. And they needed the second generation to come in and do what? To do what?
Think about our president, Ruby Rivlin, or about Dan Meridor or the others. They were raised and they read, as me. We read in the history books that their parents are fascist, dangerous people that put in danger Israel, and they didn't get any honor for their parents. They heard at home, they heard the stories about heroes. One of 10 freedom fighters was killed. 1 of 10 or 2 of 10 were injured. 1 of 10 was in jail or even sent out to Africa. 3 of 10, at least 3 of 10 were really, or killed or in jail, and they didn't get the honor that they deserved. And then, Ruby Rivlin, who was a child, went to help it's not his parents. He came to help the uncles and aunts, because they were so neglected, that they were so aside in the society, that they were like a family. They were called the freedom, the fighting family. There were like 6,000 people, that they were like a family, big family, and they came to help Begin and the others. And suddenly what happened is that they went to the universities, okay? They wanted to have a victory for their parents. And again, so how talented they are, very connected to the young generation, and he pushed them up, and then Shamir pushed them up, and suddenly said they were in the government 30 years.
Yeah, but let's go back to a little before they became a part of the government. Let's talk about their main motivation. What was it? To do justice, to see justice for their parents, or were they already thinking about taking over, about the politics of the day?
No, not at all. I can speak about myself, okay? And it's, speak about
You are a
Tzipi
prince.
Livni.
You don't look like a prince, but you are a prince in some way.
I'm not a prince. I'm not a prince, but Tzipi Livni, think about all those names that you know them, that all of them passed the same experience. It's Netanyahu and Rivlin and Tzipi Livni and Dan Meridor and Benny Begin and Uzi Landau and others at Tzachi Hanegbi.
Ehud Olmert, Ronnie Milo, and many others.
Yeah, yes. They went to school, okay? They went to school and the teachers spoke about those fascists, their parents. They spoke about the Etzel and Lehi, the underground, as the ones that put in danger Israel, that they wanted to not to have democracy and to take over. They were their parents looked like murderers, even though they were the ones that achieved the freedom. They were the ones that sent the British Army out, and then at home, their parents' generation are heroes, but outside at school, they heard that they are dangerous people, and then they started to fight against the teachers. I was fighting against the teachers when I was young.
Right. I know from your book and from our conversations, and you already mentioned it even today, this was a relatively small, tight-knit, family-like group. Couple thousands of people, very close to one another, meeting for holidays. The families knew one another. So it was a family-like culture. How come they took over a country? There were not enough people to take over a country.
Okay, first of all, undergrounds around the world, also there were a couple of thousands of people that fought for freedom and they became to be the leaders of the country. Here, there were like 6,000 fighters, with their families, with the surrounded, and there were many people that appreciated them, okay? Many people appreciated it. Then they had like 10% of the country supported them. Now think about it, that to those days, it was very frightening to support them because everything was connected with the government. If you wanted the job, you needed the Kartis Adom, the red card in order to get the job. If you would say Menachem Begin is good, you couldn't have business with the government. Everything was government here. Then it was really difficult for many years. For many years, they really couldn't get more than 10-15%. But what happened was, the main thing that happened was when Ben Gurion started to step out, and he fought with his own party. Okay, this was very important because then people that came from Arab countries, hundreds of thousands of them, that they were dependent on Ben Gurion. They admired him because they thought he brought them to Israel. Okay, suddenly they saw that his party is against him. Okay, and then little bit they started to come more to come to Begin. He was very charismatic, and Mapai or Labor then started to be involved in corruption, and also I think one of the very important situations were 67 war, the Sheshet Hayamim, the war, because Begin was speaking for 20 years. He spoke about Judea and Samaria and Jerusalem and the Kotel. He spoke about it, and people thought about him that he is not relevant. What is speaking about those things that are not here? And suddenly in 67, he joined the government, was part of the unity government first time in his life.
Right.
And suddenly people say, wow, it's realistic. What he spoke all those years, he was not a dreamer. It's happened. And then many, I speak about Israel as many tribes, okay? The richest tribe that used to be in coalition with Labor started to join Likud, Begin. The people that came from Arab countries joined Begin. The old generation joined Begin. And the princes brought the young generation because Labor was very corrupted. Then the young generation chose to vote for this new party or the opposition.
Right, and in 1977, Begin and the Likud party are becoming the leading party, and I'd like to dedicate the second half of our conversation to the 40 years since then, the time in which Likud is in power, and you know, Begin and Shamir, they are the old generation, but soon enough they need the new generation to come help them to step up and become ministers and cabinet secretaries and all these jobs that they needed to give to the younger generation. And this generation that grew up as marginalized as people can be, suddenly become the leaders of the country. So psychologically speaking, how did they handle this transition from being on the outside to becoming the establishment?
Okay, it's many questions there. Let's speak about more or less 12,000 young people that are becoming to be the legs of the old generation. They are old, like 60 years old, okay, or less, and they don't have a young generation. Those young people, they become to be the legs and the hands of the old generation. They are going to the universities. They are fighting in elections. They are bringing their friends and everything. And suddenly the old generation, Begin and then Shamir, they are looking there and say, wow, we have great generation here. Very talented. They see Ronnie Milo winning the Tel Aviv University. They see Dan Meridor in Jerusalem, and they see that they are very, very communicative. They can speak, they can bring the young generation, and slowly they are pushing them up, okay? Begin in the beginning are only bringing them into his lishka, his office, okay? He doesn't push them to the Knesset, even though Olmert and Ronnie Milo are getting into the Knesset. They are being elected to the Knesset. When Shamir is coming, and he's elected instead of Begin, he really needs the young generation because he's not as charismatic as Begin. Then he really needs them not as officers, but as generals. And he pushed them into the Knesset and then into the government. And then what happened is they changed generations because the old generation is retired. Begin retired, and then Shamir in 92. And they are the ones that are there. And they're very popular. They're clean, they're popular, they're very talented, they're very energetic, they're together, they believe in the same ideas. All of them are with the same ideas. And the old generation become to be not only Begin and Shamir, it's all the thousands of the veterans that are behind them. They have a huge backing of the veterans, that they are the ones that elect members of Knesset. And suddenly you find all those that came to help the parents, that they're on the stage. And when Shamir is leaving, then suddenly, a day after Shamir is leaving, Benny Begin is declaring that he's running to be the chairman of the party. Bibi Netanyahu immediately joined him and also is running, and he was elected. And when he was elected, and as we know history, 96, he was elected as prime minister, surprisingly. And in his government, you have Netanyahu, Limor Livnat, you have Dan Meridor, Benny Begin, Tzachi Hanegbi, and two mayors, Olmert and Ronnie Milo. We have
Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, right?
Yeah, 7 of them in the top of Israel, and they are starting to fight. Then this is the time when you have property, people fight for the property.
So they emerge as leaders during the late 80s or the 80s and the late 80s. And at the beginning of the 90s, we begin to see cracks. We begin to see infighting between these princes. Whose fault is that?
Of Benjamin Netanyahu. He was the last one that came. And they were, for many years, Dan Meridor and Benny Begin and Uzi Landau, they were probably, if I speak about 88, 92, they were 20 years. Ruby Rivlin was 25 years in politics. They passed all this terrible time in politics, okay? And suddenly come the Israeli ambassador in the UN. He come very clean and very known and very talented and a different approach. He come very fresh and he comes and he passed all of them. I remember me sitting there in the Knesset. I was the Likud spokesman then. And I will not mention, or I can mention names already. I'm sitting near Dan Meridor and Ehud Olmert, okay? Or Ronnie Milo, right. The three of them. And they speak about Netanyahu, and I understand that they are frustrated. How he became to be number one. In 88, he came from the United Nations, and he was chosen number one in the list of
the primaries,
the
right?
In the primaries, they were in shock. What is this? And they had the suggestions like, let's send him to be the mayor of Jerusalem. Let's send him to the Jewish agency, you know. And they were in shock that he passed them because he came with a lot of donations, with all the technology and the knowledge from American elections. He just passed them like that, you know, like not slowly, but he passed them and he was elected. And since then, they couldn't forgive him for winning.
So the fact that there is...
Sorry, Shmuel. And he couldn't forgive them until today.
Right, for trying to fight him. And we see this bad blood. We last saw it just a few days ago when a high-ranking official in the finance ministry, the son of Dan Meridor, was, he resigned, but he was basically ousted by Netanyahu and his allies. And you immediately see the camps, you know, President Rivlin praising Shaul Meridor, and Netanyahu is silent. He's letting him live without much talking about him. So tell me, in addition to all the personal animosities and fighting, we also see an ideological shift that might be even more interesting. If we talk about princes and princesses such as Olmert, such as Tzipi Livni, maybe Ronnie Milo to some extent, we see many of them shifting or moving more and more to the left. And suddenly there is a rift that is not just personal over, political superiority. It's also about ideology and views.
Yeah, it's very interesting because, first of all, there's a lot of sociology here. Netanyahu is different. I'll speak about the others, okay? They were very connected and they believe in the Likud and Begin's ideology. Now they came into power. When they came into power, until 96, all of them were in the same place, okay? Until Shamir left, until in the Oslo agreement, all of them were there. Only Ronnie Milo went to the left already, but most of them, they were in the same place. But then what happened when they came into power, they were ministers, they faced reality. Until then, they had like a tzava'a, they were connected and they were motivated by their parents. First of all, the parents started to die. Shamir left, Begin left, and they were free. those people became to be independent when they were 50 and more. Most of people decide about the ideas and the ideology when they're 15, 17, 19. They were free when they're 50 and when they faced the reality. When they came to power, they started to make concessions, to think what is right, not as opposition. It's different to be opposition than to be in the government. That's one thing. The second thing is a psychological or sociological thing. They were raised in Jerusalem or Tel Aviv in good neighborhoods, okay? Their friends were from center and left. Their wives or husbands, center and left. Then, and by the way, the media that covered them, center and left. Then suddenly they became, they became to be the elite. If to say more direct, they became to be the elite of Israel, part of the elite, and Netanyahu didn't want to be there. This was different than them. He didn't want to give up the opposition or the ideas of his father. By the way, his father was alive. It's different if you look at it. I had a lot of talks with them because Dan Meridor, his father, died before. Tzipi Livni and others, their fathers, Benny Begin, of course.
So you think that those of them who are still chained by their parents' generation were still in cuffs. They couldn't express their own views. They carried the burden of the previous generation, and suddenly when they were freed, some of them moved to the left where most of their friends and allies belonged.
And media.
And the media. Now tell me, when you speak to at least to some of these people and you ask them about the Likud ideology, all of them will tell you that they carry the torch of Jabotinsky and Menachem Begin. It's not as if any of them say, no, I left this behind. You ask Livni and Meridor and Olmert and Netanyahu, all of them will say, no, we are the true followers of Jabotinsky and Begin. Who's right and who's wrong?
First of all, the interesting thing is that all of them, till today, admire the old generation. They admire their parents, they admire the old generation, they admire Begin, they admire Jabotinsky, all of them, okay? And each one of them, as you said, there are two basics of Jabotinsky, Hadar and Tagar. Hadar, it's like, maybe you can explain it. Hadar is more democracy and justice and everything. And Tagar was this motivation of fighting for the government. Oh, what happened here?
Yeah, you're back. Everything is fine.
Yeah, I'm back, but my battery is telling me something. Okay, I hope that it will be okay.
While you're speaking, I'll explain that Jabotinsky in his ideology had these two principles, one of which was about what we call in Israel mamlachtiyut, the institutions of government and the elegance and all the things that you want to do so things will be civil and will be dignified. And the other part was the more the more aggressive, the more the fighting spirit of the underground of the revisionist movement. So
yeah.
So you see them both in the Princes today.
Yeah. What interesting is, and 1 second, I'm going to call my son in order to bring me a charger. Because somehow, 1 second, okay? Can you continue first?
Yeah. So in the meantime, I can say a few more things about Likud and about the second generation, and maybe begin to speak about a question that interests me, and I wanted to ask Gil about it. Maybe later we'll have an opportunity to do it. You know, whether there is a third generation. This second generation that he's speaking about really grew up in unique circumstances. These are people who grew up when it was almost illegitimate to be part of the revisionist family, of the Likud family. It was a very difficult experience, and such experience, you know, solidified the camp and solidified this family of fighters, both politically and emotionally, and in many other ways. So Gil, I was going to ask you, you know, the third generation did not go through such experience. Are we going to have a third generation of princes? So Shaul Meridor is not really a prince.
It's interesting that 23 years ago, Dan Meridor resigned from, he was a financial minister.
Of a finance ministry for Netanyahu, and he resigned,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, and now it's Shaul. The third generation is like his parents. Most of them they belong to the place that they were born, to Rehavia in Jerusalem, North Tel Aviv, Shikun Vatikim, all those nice places. And they were raised there, and most of them are center and left, most of them, like 80%. Part of them became to be religious, and they are not there. The Jabotinsky, Achimeir, Netanyahu, those families continued. And then I owe you something that we didn't speak about, and it's Netanyahu. You know, there is somebody that is a prime minister of Israel for 13 years. He is different than them. I believe that Netanyahu is he is a successor of Jabotinsky. There is something there that only somebody that met his father can understand it. Netanyahu has different roots, very, very deep roots of the belief of Jabotinsky. And I remember his father is speaking in a way that I didn't hear it here. It's you know, his ideology, and we see his ideology is different than theirs. Their ideology, most of them are like Gantz and Ashkenazi and Herzog and others, okay? More or less the same. There's such a difference. Netanyahu was the one that organized here when he was 29 years old. He organized a conference, a huge conference of people from all over the world, including senators, against the international terrorism. That nobody used this term at this time, international terrorism. There was not a term like that. Many years ago, like 40 years ago, he started to speak against Iran. He spoke about the threat from Iran. He got from his father the thing that the Jewish people don't see threats. The Jewish people in Israel all those years and in the diaspora didn't see the threat. And he looked at himself as the one that understands the threats and knows how to give them answers, not to give up, but to stand. And I think it's different than others.
Right. Yeah, I could ask you many questions about what you just said about Netanyahu, because as you well know, and I know, many of the leaders of the previous generation did not see Netanyahu as a proper successor. Shamir did not much trust him. If you speak to someone like Aryeh Eldad from, also son of the fighting family, he would also tell you that Netanyahu is a fake revisionist in some ways. But I suggest that we stop here, and we will see if there are questions from our patient listeners and viewers. And if there are questions, you'll answer the questions. And if there aren't, then I can keep asking questions until midnight or maybe half an hour later.
Okay, thank you very much, both of you. Thank you, Gil, for some great insights and and really, I think, encouraging us all to buy the book, and Shmuel for doing a great job as ever as the interviewer. So I'm actually waiting for some questions to come in. I think people will maybe start writing them in now. I'm going to take the opportunity to ask a question of my own as the host. I'm wondering whether, and obviously your book is about the Likud and the Princes, but I'm wondering whether you have some insight as to why this doesn't seem to have happened on the other side, why you don't see the same children of the Mapaynikim, of the labor movement leaders. We don't hear about the children of Ben Gurion or Levi Eshkol going into politics. I know some did for a short time. Moshe Dayan's daughter and was Leah Rabin involved in politics for a short time?
Uzi Baram, Avril Borg.
Okay, so
there are a few.
There's the odd name, but there's nothing like this wave of the next generation. Why do you think? What's the difference? What's the key difference, do you think?
Okay, first of all, in Israel and all over the world, there are some names here and there in this party, in that party, in this decade, the other decade. You have Bush and Kennedy, and in Israel, Rabin and Dayan, and what happened? Okay.
You're back.
If it would be not okay, then I will continue with my iPhone, and there's no problem. Then this is very sporadic. What happened here, and there is what I studied about the generation studies. It's when you have in certain time a major event that changed the mind of a young generation, like the Holocaust, like the riots in Israel. All this generation of the underground, they became to be, like one unit. And it was a very unique situation that all their children raised in frustration, in dedication to the parents, and frustration. They believe in that generation. They believe that they brought independence to Israel, and they read about terrible things about the old generation, okay? And then they joined together. Again, they didn't think that they would be leaders. They just came to help. Ruby Rivlin carried weapon when he was 5 years old in the underground, okay? Tzipi Livni put off the red flags from buildings in May 1st, okay? Ehud Olmert was involved in elections. They were activists. The thing is that after it, the old generation left politics and left the leadership. And let's say in the Central Committee of Likud, there were like 3,000 people. 1,000 people were veterans, and they brought the young generation up because they wanted succession. They want the second generation. They want them to be. You had to be there and to see how they treated them. How Tzipi Livni came to my office in '96. Okay, she was a lawyer, no connection to politics, and she said, I want to join politics. I said, there are elections 3 months from now. How can you run for elections? She said, I want to run. And she was elected. She was elected in '99 because the name Livni, her parents, both of them were amazing fighters in the underground. And the veterans voted for her, okay? It was automatically. And then the old generation brought not their own sons. It was not nepotism. Her father were not involved, but the uncles, the so-called uncles, they pushed her up. Exactly the same as Dan Meridor and Uzi Landau and Tzachi Hanegbi and Ruby and the president, and the prime minister.
Great. Okay, that was not only a very full answer, it was also long enough to give people time to ask some questions. So that was great. So we have here a question from Leah Yerushalmi, who asks, she says that she thinks that the term "the princes" is a derogatory term coming from outside of the Likud, from the left-wing establishment?
First of all, I'm joining you from an iPhone.
Okay.
One of the interesting things that Gil mentioned earlier, and this is actually true, is that today in Israel, when people say princes, nesichim, you automatically think about politics, not about royalty. The term became such common in political commentary and in newspaper writings, etc., is that it was basically stolen away from the area of royalty and became just a substitute to this long description of this group of politicians. And if you go in many Israeli streets or neighborhoods and you say, yeah, but I read something about the Nesichim, people will immediately recognize that you are talking about Olmert, Livni, Netanyahu, and Rivlin, and not about British or Danish or any other Spanish royalty. They'll understand that we are speaking about Israeli politics.
Yeah, it's, you know, when we wanted to publish the book in English, I wanted the name Princes, but then the publisher said, "What is Princes? Princes, it's the royal family and everything." And I said, "Wow, yeah, you're right. In Israel, it's them. If you ask people in Israel, they immediately will say the Likud Princes, even though it's Olmert, it's Dan Meridor, it's Tzipi Livni. They are not in the Likud for some years, but they will say Likud Princes."
But if I remember correctly, the question, Gil, was whether Hanesichim is a derogatory term, whether they were called this name by people who disliked them.
Yes, it was, you know, there are two people that started with this term. It was, one is Eitan Haber, who was himself was a prince and he was a journalist. And he's saying that he used this term. Publicly, it was Uri Dan, who was Sharon's assistant. And he said, when the princes were against Sharon in Lebanon war, he spoke about the princes. Those young people, they did nothing until now. Their hands, you know, they don't have anything that they can speak about themselves. They're only young people. And he said about the princes, he said it in a way of like, who are them? Who is Benny Begin and Dan Meridor that is speaking with Menachem Begin against Ariel Sharon?
Right, and we should remind our viewers that Sharon was not part of the underground family. He came from a Labor Party family. He came from the Hityashvut, and he even fought against the Etzel at some point. So Sharon was a Likud member, but he was not part of this family of
Not
princes.
Not at all. They hated him.
So Gil, you've just answered one of the questions. There was a question by Robin Gottlieb about how the princes felt about Sharon in the party, because as you said, as Shmuel said, he was an outsider really to the he was sort of part of when the Likud was formed as this coming together of the Cherut with other parties. Sharon was part of that, and he of course.
Do you want me to tell you a small story about it? Okay.
Yes. Just before you do, can you turn the light? Can you turn the light down or off just above?
Yeah, 1 second. 1 second.
It's quite bright.
Now we will not see him at all.
No. That's.
Is it better now? Or?
That's great. Thank you. So,
it's okay. Let's hope it's a dark story. So maybe
it's a dark story. When you know, I was very close to Moshe Arens, to Misha Arens, who was number 2 of Yitzhak Shamir, and he was also Beitar, Etzel, and Sharon once spoke against Arens, very low attack, okay? And what I did, I was very close to Ahrens. I spoke with the veterans and I asked them, do you remember if Sharon was participating in the Saison, in the, when they gave to the British Army members of the fighting family, okay, of the underground? Do you know anyone that maybe he kicked somebody, he gave somebody to the British Army? And then there was somebody that came to my office and said, yes, he came to me. He, how do you say, he kicked me?
Yeah.
And gave me to the British Army. And I took him and I gave him to the Israeli radio, to one of my friends in the radio. And he was speaking there against Sharon. He said, he was against us. He was in the other side. Maybe that's something that you can understand, that the fighting family, the two generations, they really couldn't stand Sharon. They didn't want Sharon to be there with them because they felt that it's not him. Because the Likud party or Herut party or Etzel, it was not only underground or a party, it was a family. That's something that people cannot understand. It was a family, and in the family, the old generation wanted the young generation to replace them, that it will be themselves. And it's the only place, only party on earth that it's 100 years of two generations. It's 100 years. There's nothing like that. That when you see the Likud leadership or Etzel or Lehi and the Likud till today, it's two generations. It's amazing. There's the same names.
Okay, we have a question here from Melvin Lipich, who asks, do you see any successors to Netanyahu in the mold of the princes or princesses? Are there also, I think specifically he's asking whether there are any successors who are similarly heirs to the revisionist idea, who are some part of the family, part of the revisionist family.
I think, first of all, we are in the end of this era, okay? 100 years, it's enough. It's less than 100 years because Jabotinsky died like 8 years ago, okay? But Menachem Begin was very essential in 1935 already. I think, you know, they are old people. Sorry to say, they're princes, but they are 70 and 80 years ago, old, okay? Benny Begin and Ruby Rivlin and the others, it's like between 70 and 90 years old, okay? Only Tzipi Livni is younger. Then it's the end of their era, okay? Now, the interesting thing is that when you look about the leadership of Israel, you find other princes. You know that Yossi Cohen, the head of the Mossad, the Israeli Mossad, I have it, you know, I'm writing my new book, The Begins, okay? That the Begin Center is helping me, and thank you. Then I have it here on my computer, a story that I heard, and I wrote it yesterday, that his grandfather was in the underground, and he was tortured by by Haganah. Tortured, I mean, kidnapped and tortured by the Haganah, okay? For 18 days, he didn't eat, he didn't sleep, he didn't, you know, like anything, okay? Then it's Yossi Cohen, who I believe that will be in politics in the future. Mandelblit, the government advisor.
The Attorney General, yes, the Attorney General.
His father, I knew his father. His father was an amazing man. He was a very nice and happy and a very good person, Mickey Mandelblit. His father was in the underground. He was fighting in Jaffa. There was a fight for Jaffa, and he came into this battle without. He was not supposed to be there. He came there. He was injured very badly. Nobody wanted to take care of him because he was from the Etzel. Okay, he was from the underground, even though he fought for Israel, but nobody wanted to take care of him, and he carried it all these years. And his son is Mandelblit. I don't have to explain anything. I can add another name, the General Halevi.
Herzi Halevi.
Herzi Halevi. His grandfather was number 2 in the Etzel, in the underground. then they still are people that are second and third generation. I don't see, it will not be the same. It will be very personal. If one of the sons or daughters will come, okay, but I think the Likud now will not choose any prince after Netanyahu because of what happened with the other princes, because what happened with Olmert and Tzipi Livni, and also the president. And you know, in the Likud there are some people that don't like what he's doing. I don't see a continuation, and it's okay. And generally, Israeli politics after Netanyahu will be so different. It will not be the politics that we know. Israeli politics now, it's such a very simple thing. It's Netanyahu or against Netanyahu. That's the only thing, not economy, not anything. Everything is, are you for Netanyahu or against Netanyahu? That's all. And after Netanyahu will go home, it will be, everything will be arranged from the beginning, because maybe we'll get here right and left, from economical perspective, from security, you know, it will be different, completely different, my opinion.
Okay.
But he's not going, so
yeah,
you know.
I was going to say it could be that he'll still be prime minister when the grandchildren of the
He would like it.
Okay, there's a question here. Also, staying on the topic of Netanyahu, you explained why the other princes became involved in politics as part of the younger generation of the fighting family in Israel. But what motivated Netanyahu to go into politics? Because I think the point he's making is that unlike the others, his father moved to the United States when he was very young. He wasn't part of that process of being in Israel during the Mapai years and being part of that sort of, the group that were on the pushed to the sidelines by the left-wing establishment.
You know, it's, do you see me? Yeah. You know, there is a sentence of the song, the hymnon, the
anthem.
Of the underground. No, it's not the Tikva.
Oh,
it's the hymnon
right, the anthem of the underground, right.
Of Lehi, of the underground. Meshura meshachrer rak hamavet. From duty, you're released only by death. And when you see all those princes, the ones that in politics and out of politics, they were born to be in politics, okay? They were born to be in politics. Each one of them, if you call each one of them now, I don't want to say names, but you know, in 2009, Benny Begin and Dan Meridor were out of politics already. And Netanyahu called them, and they came. They came to be in the list. They wanted to be there. They are. It's for life. Netanyahu the same. I think Netanyahu is different because I think Netanyahu, his roots, his ideological roots are different, because we were raised differently. You know, we were kids in Israel. It's something different than to be raised in the house of Professor Ben-Zion Netanyahu, who had very, very deep roots. And Netanyahu, you know, you see how he works when he has a tribe, and he has relationship with the Emirates, and he has so many things, and he has such a power that only somebody that really believes in himself, believes in his ideology, is there. And I think that all of them, you see, Ruby Rivlin, you know how many years Ruby Rivlin is involved in politics? If I think 60 years. Can you believe 60 years involved in politics? Netanyahu himself already, he's 40 years in politics. 38 years, okay, in politics. It's amazing. Dan Meridor, it's like 35 years. So many years. They were born to fight for for the country, and we have to say something positive about them. They really love Israel, and they really want to contribute to the future of Israel, all of them.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't think we have other questions. Shmuel, did you want to conclude with anything? I think that's Gil's last comment was a very nice way to end, but I want to give you the chance to give any follow-up thoughts or final questions to Gil.
My follow-up thoughts will be the ones I started with. You cannot understand Israel if you don't understand Likud. You cannot understand Likud if you don't understand the Princes. And you cannot understand the Princes if you don't read Gil's book. So I encourage you to read his book so that you can better understand Israel, where it's coming from and where it's going.
Okay. I want to thank both of you very, very much for your time. As I said, the book is Netanyahu and Likud's Leaders. You can get it on Amazon or Book Depository.
You can have also in Hebrew.
And if you can read, if you read Hebrew,
it's cheaper. It's cheaper.
Sure, cheaper. The original Hebrew Nasichim, published a couple of years ago. I also, with Shmuel Rosner here, I want to again plug his book, Israeli Judaism, which is a fantastic book that he co-authored. And I hope you will join me again next week for another discussion. I'll send details out to those people on my mailing list. Those that are not on my mailing list, you can get on the mailing list by emailing me, paulg@begincenter.org.il, or the information will be on our website and Facebook page. So I thank you all again, and good evening. Bye.
Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you, Shmuel. Thank you, Paul.
Bye, Gil. Bye.